Hi, I'm Pedro Diaz with Vivid Clear Glass, and we're going to take some scratches out of this table. First thing you want to do is always remember your PPE, personal protective equipment. This is an N95 mask. This is really going to help keep the dust out of your lungs. Glasses, I got my glasses on, so that's also going to protect me. You can put something in your ears to protect from the noise. This is going to be a quick sample, so we should be fine. Now, what I'm looking at here, obviously this table it's been really worn. There's scratches all around it. We're going to pick a small area here. We're going to work on it. Inside this small area, I'm seeing some scratches that are 3,007 inch and greater, and 3,000 inch and less than that. Sunlit scratches. Because we have the lights, you can see them here, but otherwise you wouldn't be able to really see those. Those are not the ones that we're really attacking here. We're attacking the deeper ones. That's why we're going to use our sanding discs. Start with that 180, then I like to bounce into the 360, 500, and 1,000. Sometimes you can play with those numbers, but you do those basic steps, not much of a jump between them, and you should be good and clear. You won't be left with any swirl marks, and the haze should be nice and even after each one of those passes. You'll see now in the demonstration, it'll be a few passes with each one. The first one's gonna take the longest because that's the workhorse that's gonna take out that deep scratch. Once that one's gone, then the other pads are used to remove the scratches, the fine scratches that you see from those previous pads. So I've identified the area. What I like to do is prep. I like the blue painter's tape. This really sticks well, and it's gonna run through the whole process without loosening up and coming off. Looking good. So we've squared off the area here. This is going to act as a dam for the dust because it's going to be pushing the dust off to the sides. Even if this panel was vertical, you can do the same thing, and it is going to protect and keep everything a little closer to you. Okay, here are the tools. We have our 6 amp polisher with our backer pad. Comes on and off. We already have the handle on, so this is going to help us keep the polisher steady as we're doing our work, removing that scratch, getting to the bottom of it, and then polishing it out back to clear. We like to use this angle brush. This will help remove any bit of dust that cakes up on the pads as you're running through the process, and help that grit get back to work on the glass instead of getting all caked up with the powder. Here's that first pad. We use that 180. I use that 180. It's a fresh, brand new pad. And you can see here we have our compound and our powder. So the powder, this helps remove any kind of contaminants on the surface, any oils or anything, in case it wasn't just cleaned properly, but this always helps. So we like to add it in between every step. It helps lubricate and get the process going right away. This is a 1200 grit aluminum oxide, which is going to sprinkle a little bit onto the surface of the pad. It's pretty good. So I'm going to work an area here, leaving enough room along the perimeter to work and overlap with the other sequential pads. Now, if you're wondering, I have this polisher set to full speed. As far as revolutions, we're looking at somewhere between 2,500 to 4,000 RPM. I'll be running at about 4,000 RPM, at 3,800 to 4,000 RPM. That will give you a nice, even, consistent haze, and it should get the pad working fairly quickly. See the dust here? So this dust here, this what's on the pad, is glass. We like to just give it a little bump, get that off. I also like to wipe it out of the way. And you can see there's a little bit of a haze formed already. That's the pad working. Some of the scratches, some of the really fine scratches have already gone. We do still have this deeper scratch, which is why we're using this heavier grit. It's looking much better. Still got a few points there on the deeper scratches. The point of impact, which is typically where the scratch is the deepest. So I brought out the thermometer here. The temperature we like to keep this at is between 150 and 180. Right now we're looking at about 104 degrees. So we're keeping well below that, and it's working perfectly, the process. The pad is doing its job and it's not heating up the glass. You can see the pattern that I'm using, just a side to side and then back up and down. That prevents any type of distortion. If you start to do any other kind of patterns with the heavier pads, you could start to distort the glass. So you want to do this pattern of coming down, like S patterns up and down. But we're working the glass, temperature's looking good, no chance of anything breaking. And we're still in this first step. We got still a few more points to go. Once we get those out, then we'll move on to the following pads. Okay, as you can see, the dam, the prep that we did, is holding all the dust in. It's not creating a big mess around here, so that's always key. The other thing you see me doing when I polish, you don't want to touch the surface of the glass once you start polishing, because you have oils and residues on your fingers, and if you put that on there, it's going to create a coating where if you continue to polish, the sanding disc is not going to be able to polish that area like it is the rest. So you could do a little damage to your repair. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We've gotten all the scratches, those 3/1000 of an inch and deeper. We've got them all now with the 180. One thing I wanted to mention to you guys as I'm polishing is the amount of pressure that you're putting onto the polisher. I would tell you it's somewhere between 7 and 10 pounds. As if you were carrying a 10-pound weight in your hand, that's how much pressure you have to be pushing down onto the glass. You'll see when the pad starts to work on the glass, it'll start to haze it and mark it. That's where you want to stay. Don't go any further than that, because then you can cause distortion. Uneven passes, you could distort, so you want to keep it really good and flat all the way through the whole entire process, all the steps, all the way down to the 1000 grit. Just going to pull this guy off here, put it to the side, bring in the next guy. I use that 360. These are 5-inch pads. So here's the perimeter of that 180. What I'm going to do with this guy now is I'm going to overlap that, because if I keep working in the same area, I'm going to just dig down instead of kind of feather it out. So with this 360, this is just a little jump. It's a jump. It's a jump between that 500. Sometimes we skip the 360, but I always like using it. It's a more consistent polish all the way through, giving you the best finish. Brand new pad. We're gonna dust it up again. And we're just gonna do a slight overlap, about a ½ inch or so. Now the haze here is looking really good and consistent. I make this look easy. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm sure you guys are gonna run into a couple issues. Feel free to reach out to us in the comments. Give us a call, phone number. Reach out to us. We can answer all those questions and help you get through. But we get calls all the time. We go out and we do the services for you. We travel. You know, this is not just me. We have several technicians on board. We're always doing projects for large-scale construction companies and residences alike, property management companies, but this is a real issue, and you know, there's a solution. So let's keep going here. We did this 360 here for a bit. It's looking really good. The haze tends to go pretty quick from the 180 to the 360. We're gonna give it one more quick pass. We're gonna jump to the other ones and get to the polish. There you go. So the pad is working. You can see all the dust here. Just gonna get that off. And that haze is looking pretty good. It looks nice and even all the way through. The overlap looks good as well. So I'm voting to move on to the next. Just gonna take this off, set it aside. I'm gonna clean this up a bit. You can see all this dust coming off just for those small scratches. Okay guys, so I just finished up with this second step of the 360. Haze is looking all good and even. I just checked it, wiped it down, kept it a little clean. I moved the dust over to the side, so I'm just gonna take a little extra tape here and cover that dust up. Basically encapsulate that, so I don't have to keep dealing with it. Helps a little bit. Still giving us enough space to work with the following pads. Just a little tip. I'm gonna start with the 500 now. A little bit of powder. So the other thing is, you're gonna start with that 180, and you don't always have to get the scratch all the way to the bottom, because you have quite a few other pads coming in after that. So if the scratch lightens up just enough, the other pads will do the rest of the job. So you don't have to dig as deep. You can let the other pads do some of the work. It's gonna be just fine. It's a really good way to do that. Always start and stop the polisher on the glass. You don't want to start the polisher before you start on the glass. You don't want to pull the polisher off the glass with it still rolling. This does have an automatic stay, which keeps it rolling going, so you don't have to keep your hand on the trigger. That's something that if you were to pull it off with it going, you're going to get splatter and dust everywhere. So best to start and stop on the glass always. Using this 500, I can clearly see now where the scratches start and stop, where the 180 did its work. Those deep scratches are all gone, including the lighter ones around it. And I can see the perimeter. So now when we get down into this 500, finishing up, let's check the temperature quickly here. Perfect. 115, not even close to that 120 yet. That's why it's so important to run this pattern and run around. Don't want to focus and stay on that same scratch, because you will distort it. You will dig down into the glass. You don't want to do that. You always want to keep that pattern going. You know, constant movement, never stop, never stay in the same spot. Work that square, work the circle, depends on what you want to do, okay? Just gonna hit it a little more with this 500. .500 is doing some work here. See all that dust coming off? These are really good pads. Perimeter looks good. Now, one thing that what I emphasize and tell folks to really look and pay attention to is where you see the difference in the repair. It's going to be on the edge. This is an area that hasn't been worked. Still very clear. This is an area that has been worked and it's all hazy. So when you start to get to those final steps, try to focus as much as you can to remove that transition, work on that edge so that the transition between where it's worked and where it hasn't been worked is practically unnoticeable. That way your repair won't be spotted. We are removing material from the glass, so it is changing the dynamics, but we're only removing a couple thousandths of an inch. We're not going too deep to where it's gonna affect the integrity of the glass. So this is a perfectly safe process. Works every time, and you'll see the results in a few minutes. We're gonna move on here to the 1000 grit. This should be your last polish with the sanding discs. We're gonna add a little more of this dust. So this is 1000, this is a 1200. So we are sanding a bit with this powder, and it does help get a more clear haze. So from the 180, this has cleared up a heck of a lot. It's lightened up, you can see it, it's a lot more translucent now. When you first start off, it's very, very frosty. That's showing all those micro scratches. They're much more aggressive. As you lighten up with the grit, which is the numbers go up, that frosted look is really gonna start to fade almost to a perfectly clear glass. Once we finish with this sanding process, we're going to move on to the compound, which is going to be the wet process with these foam applicating pads. So we'll do a slight overlap on this again. This is going to be our last step with the sanding, and we'll move on to the wet process. You can see that first step, when I run onto the first pad, I typically run around the perimeter a couple times to soften that up, break up that hard line. We don't want a hard line, we want a little bit of a cloudy transition here. We don't want that hard line, so try to work that little edge area to feather it out, which is gonna show that the process is working just right and the repair is gonna look great. This is the 1000. You can see the pad is working great. Always work these repairs with brand new pads. Very little time on these pads. Otherwise, you'll be just spinning and heating up the glass. The pads will be if you're using used pads, they're just going to be heating up the glass. They're not going to be doing any work. It's going to be a risk. I'm going to add a little more of this powder. Looking pretty good. Hey guys, this repair is looking really good, honestly. Good and even. I'm looking at it in the light. I don't see any more scratches in the area we first started. You can see we've overlapped a little bit, maybe about 3 inches or so on each side. That's because we're using several pads, and we always want to overlap about a ½ inch to an inch, depending on how much space you have to work. So this is going to be it for the dry process. I'm gonna jump right into the 3-inch foam applicator pad. Got my name on it. Before I start, I'm gonna check the temperature. We're about 113 here. If you do get the glass a little bit hot, let it just cool down on its own, ambient. But it is in a pretty low temperature, 113 degrees. Your windshield on a hot day gets way above that. So there's no real issues here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get a little water. If you need to cool it down, you take one of these utility microfiber towels. You wanna wet the towel, you know, maybe moisten it up like this. If you really wanna cool it down, you can do a little pass. Glass is nice and clean now. So this is now our wet process. We're going to be using the compound. Here's my pad. I want to wet the pad just a little bit. This will help the compound stick and kind of flow into the pad, into the pores of the pad. Obviously, always shake well. Always shake your compound. So here's the compound. We're going to use this now to remove this haze. One little thing I like to do, because see the glass is all good and clear now, but once you start polishing with this wet, it's going to kind of make a mess. So I like to just outline where you see that haze. So you start a mental picture of where, you keep a mental picture of where you're working instead of having to go and work in areas where you haven't. All right. Start in the center, then we're gonna run around, do the perimeter, and then polish over the whole pad. Now this compound, the particle sizes is we're looking at about 2.5 to 3 microns. So this is not gonna this is gonna only remove light scratches. It's not gonna remove any of the deeper 3,000 or more scratches. So you're not risking any damage as far as keeping it in the same places. This just removes haze, and those really, really fine sunlit scratches. So you can work the pattern a little differently here. You can work that edge really well with no worries about causing some distortion. That should have taken care of it by now. You're gonna see that the glass is a little warm, so it is gonna dry up a bit. That's why we want to keep applying just a little bit of water on this, just to keep it moist. We don't want to keep it too wet, where it's gonna start to splash everywhere and make a really big mess. So just a little bit of water at a time. Polish. You'll see the transition from the hazy, that fine haze, to that beautiful clear that we're looking for. After that, we just give it a good wipe down, and it'll look good as new. Okay guys, that looks like a perfect finish to me. I'm gonna check it with the light now, make sure everything is good and gone. Now, something that you guys might run into issues is once you finish with the polish, if it's not looking perfectly clear, you may have not run the other pads long enough to remove the swirls, the fine lines from the previous pads. So always check your work between the pads. It's going to be a little tough sometimes on the more aggressive pads, but on the finer pads, 500 and 1000, you're going to be able to see if you removed all of the 180 or all of the 360 if you're using those pads. So that's one thing to be careful with. Just, check your work. You'll look at it now and you'll see that it's a perfect cleaner finish. Sometimes you might find a little bit of swirling. You just have to go back a step or two, run that process again, and then go through, and very likely it'll be gone. I'm gonna clean this all up now so we can see the transition between where the scratches are, where the haze was, and now where it's all nice and clear and brand new. It looks really good. I can see a little bit of haze left here, so I'm just gonna work a little bit longer on that little spot. That should take it out. Remember, the compound will remove those fine scratches. So anything after that 500, this should do the trick. It's gonna take a little longer. It's nice to work with that 500 and that 1000 to finish up, but this will do the trick. So if you don't feel comfortable with sanding again and maybe running into the same issue, you can spend a little more time with the compound. That should do the trick. There it is. Man, that looks good. Oof, perfect. That's it. I don't see anything. Hey guys, so that's the full process. We're gonna clean this up now and show you the befores and afters. Hi, I'm Pedro Diaz from Vivid Clear Glass, and if you want more tips, like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram.